The Scandinavian defense is such an underrated opening. Many players dismiss it just because you bring your queen out early and they think it's easy to attack. But that's where they're wrong. Here's the trick. Don't capture the pawn immediately. Instead, develop your knight first and then recapture the pawn with it. This simple adjustment gives you a strong, active position right from the start. Now, in this position, most of your opponents will choose to develop their knight to the c3 square. Some players, especially those who are more determined to defend their extra material, will try to hold on to their pawn by playing pawn to c4. However, the move that is generally considered the strongest, recommended by the computer and often played by intermediate to advanced players, is pawn to d4. We will take a look at all these possible options so that you are completely prepared for anything your opponent might choose. But let us begin with pawn to d4, which is regarded as the most challenging response for black. At this point, you could simply stick to the main plan and recapture the pawn, which is perfectly fine and leads to a balanced position. However, my favorite idea here is to play bishop to g4. This move immediately puts pressure on white and throws them off balance. It often creates confusion because the position suddenly becomes sharp and tense. Of course, white will not necessarily lose the queen. They have several ways to defend, but most of those defensive options are quite passive. If white tries to just hold the position without counterplay, it allows black to take full control of the game and gradually build a strong initiative. At this stage, you can even capture the pawn with your queen, as it not only regains the material, but also adds another layer of pressure on the knight on c3. From here, you can smoothly continue development, for example, by bringing your knight out, increasing the tension on the center. If you then decide to castle on the queen's side, your rooks immediately become active, and your pieces are perfectly coordinated to attack along the central files. Your bishop is already targeting the center, and a potential pawn break might open up powerful attacking lines. This position is absolutely safe for black, especially if white plays passively and only focuses on defense. However, a more ambitious approach from white is to push the pawn forward to c4, attacking your bishop. After your bishop retreats, white can temporarily hold on to their extra pawn, and they should, because if they don't, you will simply recapture and destroy their structure. Even so, this move comes with serious drawbacks for white. The king's safety becomes compromised, and the knight's natural development is blocked. Despite appearances, this is not ideal for white. Still, after pawn to c4, things might look promising for your opponent. They're up a pawn and seem to control the center with an impressive pawn chain. But don't worry. We've got something special prepared here that completely turns the tables. First, you continue with pawn to e6, directly challenging and undermining white's powerful pawn center. When white captures the pawn, you keep playing boldly and energetically with knight to c6, immediately attacking the pawn on d4. From your opponent's point of view, it might look like you are playing recklessly, giving up material and exposing your king. But in reality, the opposite is true. If you look closely, white's position has achieved very little. Most of their pieces are still sitting on their starting squares, while all of your forces are quickly mobilizing for a dangerous attack. Moves like bishop to d2 and rook to e8, with check come into play rapidly, increasing the pressure. The knight keeps targeting the d4 pawn, and your entire army is coming to life while your opponent is still struggling to coordinate their pieces. At this point, white must make a decision about the d4 pawn. If they try to defend it by pushing it forward, as many players do, it only worsens their position. Your knight then jumps to an advanced square, creating immediate threats. For example, a potential fork on c2. To prevent that, white usually plays knight to a3 to cover the square, but that too plays right into your hands. Now you have the perfect opportunity to develop your bishop to b4, taking full control of the a5 to e1 diagonal. This not only develops another piece with tempo, but also prevents white from castling for the rest of the game. Your pieces are active, your attack is building, and your opponent is already on the defensive, all while you've created immense pressure straight from the opening. Because of this, white's king cannot castle anymore. Meanwhile, your rook is ready to join the attack along the open file, and your opponent's position is already collapsing. Interestingly, white has done nothing wrong. They played natural moves, trying to punish your risky opening, but you've completely turned the tables. The most common response here is bishop to d2, though it doesn't really help. You now play rook to e8, launching a powerful attack that often decides the game. An even stronger idea is to sacrifice your knight to open the diagonal for your queen, a brilliant and entertaining tactic. When white captures the knight, you reply with rook to e8 check. If white blocks with the knight, you deliver a beautiful checkmate immediately. If they block with bishop to e2, your plan still works. The sacrifice was only to clear the diagonal. Now your queen enters with a check, and if the king moves, it's a scholar's mate on the spot. And if white tries to defend by pushing the pawn forward, that fails too, because you follow up with a knight check, and after the king moves, you finish the attack with queen takes on h3. A brilliant finale that would make any chess coach proud. Black pawn. Your opponent might clap sarcastically, thinking you've blundered after sacrificing the queen. But when they capture it, you calmly recapture with your bishop, and it turns out to be a brilliant checkmate. That move with the bishop is not only beautiful, but also incredibly satisfying to play. However, there's another line that's even trickier for your opponent to handle. You can simply stay true to your original plan and recapture the pawn with your knight. Many players underestimate this move, but it's a clever and practical choice. Even if the computer dislikes it, don't worry. In real games, especially Blitz, this position is extremely dangerous for white. I've personally used it in the Scandinavian defense against titled players, and it works like a charm. White will usually try to attack your knight, either with a pawn or with the queen. If they go for the most aggressive option, queen to a4, delivering a check and attacking the knight at the same time, it looks as though you're in serious trouble. You calmly block the check with your knight, and now white thinks they can win material by playing pawn to d5, pinning your knight. But here comes your stunning counterattack, pawn to b5. This sudden strike breaks white's plan completely and turns the position upside down in your favor. Black pawn. You play pawn to b5 to break the pin and free your knight. But your opponent stubbornly captures the pawn with the queen, keeping the pin alive. What they miss, however, is that by moving the queen, they've stopped controlling a key square, allowing your knight to leap forward with a deadly fork. The king is forced to move, and this leads to one of the most satisfying attacking sequences in the entire opening. Now the position still looks sharp and complex, but your next move, bishop to d7, is simply elegant. White's rook is hanging, the king is misplaced, and naturally, white will try to simplify by capturing one of your knights. If the king captures the knight on c2, you respond with knight to d4, forking both the king and queen. The king remains exposed, and the queen is lost. A complete disaster for white. If white decides to capture your second knight, that's when your real masterpiece begins. You immediately respond with bishop to g4, an absolutely stunning move that delivers a double check. The king has no choice but to capture the knight, but this only worsens white's situation. Since the queen has drifted too far from home, your queen steps in with confidence, moving to d1 and delivering a powerful check. As the king scrambles for safety, you follow up with queen takes bishop, adding yet another check and tightening the net. At this point, the white king is completely exposed in the middle of the board with no proper shelter. If it tries to flee toward the king's side, your bishop cuts it off with another precise check, driving it deeper into danger. And then comes the grand finale, pawn to a5. This seemingly quiet move is actually devastating, opening the diagonal for your bishop to join the attack. Together, your two bishops create a flawless checkmating pattern, trapping the king with perfect coordination. Thanks for watching.